From my perspective, the best NEDs that I see are those who sort of engage with the executive team, ask lots of questions, keep them honest, make sure that they are abreast of all the, making sure they're attending all the board meetings, making sure they're aware of, I suppose, the specific challenges in the industry and the challenges the company itself faces. And I think making sure they also sort of keep track of anything significant the company's encountering. Maybe that's a transaction coming up, maybe it's the fact that they need to publish their accounts soon, and making sure they have all the information they need. And sometimes I think NEDs need to be quite proactive with that instead of just sort of waiting to be sent things.
Because those of you who are in the financial services sector will know that during the cost of living crisis, balance sheets of building societies, other lending institutions have been under significant pressure as people have started to spend their savings. Interest rates have risen as well. So that's driven up the price of deposits and attracting new customers in. So although a plan is easy to write down, it's actually really tough for credit unions to attract savings in. And as you can see, between 2022 and 2023, balances actually went down as a result of the cost of living crisis and that higher competition. But they've taken steps with some new products, some great pricing and some promotion to drive that deposit growth up. And it needs to grow because, as you can see, it needs to be at about 21 million by 2026 to make the maths work. Strong social impact is remaining at the heart of what the credit union's trying to do. So it's not about stopping lending to poorer credit risks, but it's about doing it in a sensible way and rather broadening into segments that the credit union probably hasn't operated in the past.
The truth of the matter is nobody knows what good looks like until the FCA says so. So that's one thing I'll put out. But one thing I do draw comfort from is what I've been drafting for one of my clients compared to what I've been reviewing from some of the other more substantial clients is consistency. We're all seeming to be pulling together things in a similar way. So one thing the FCA wouldn't be able to say is that if we're all doing the same thing, we're all wrong. It would be more, if we're all doing the same thing and the FCA is not happy with it, they probably have to revisit the messaging that they put out.
But cybercrime is not just a UK problem. We must work with our allies and partners and others across the world to tackle and build resilience. But for the UK, our long-term solution must lie in making organisations harder to attack. And put simply, the incredible benefits that digitisation, including AI and other emerging technologies, offer cannot be maximised unless digital transformation is underpinned by a whole of society approach to ensuring national security.
And I think always going back to what's the objective, what is the goal, what is the purpose, what's the mission, is a good place to start, because everything should follow from that. And everything in the organization should be aligned to that, whether it be processes, culture, org design, etc. And that's why that first step is, what is the change and why is it needed? Because if you can get agreement upon that, then you can have honest debate about how you should achieve it.
Listen to and encourage positive emotions. Think about your engagement and feedback structure. Relationships. How are relationships formed? How do you build on them? What's the quality of the relationships? Is it transactional? Is it friendly? How do people feel in the organization? How do you, when it comes to mission and meaning, do people believe that what they're doing makes a difference? And this really does strike home with the under 30s. They want to mend the world. They want to make this a good thing to be and a good place to be. And you can find your mission and meaning in lots of things. I had 20 years in financial services, and you might think, oh, well, that's just all about numbers and stuff like that. How do you find mission and meaning in that? But I used to sit down with every employee and say, when you're dealing with someone's pension fund, you're dealing with a thing that's really precious to them, that's going to give them the life that they really want. And this represents every missed school day, every missed school field exercise they went on, every holiday that was interrupted by a work call. All of these things are now in this bucket, and you are taking care of that. It's really, really important. So think about the mission and meaning, and also then the accomplishments. How do you tell people when they've done a really good job? What's the culture around that? So yes, it's just a few things to have a think about on how to upgrade your cultural experience.
On the public front, I think maybe there is more from what I've gathered. There's more formality in some of the European boards than the American boards. I would say the American boards are typically fairly casual. They follow a strict agenda. However, the discussions tend to be much more free-flowing and more open. The US board members tend to think of themselves as being very independent, and they think of themselves as being the boss of the CEO. That is not that clear in Europe, is my sense.
We do reverse mentoring for our clients, but also within our space, because actually there is a lot that we can learn from Gen Z, and there's things that they can learn for us. So we manage the expectations at the start in terms of this is what you are expected to deliver on. It's not here's a to-do list. It's these are your responsibilities. That's what you're expected to deliver on, and that's what you will be required to update on. And then when we're working with clients who are at a senior level, it's also around being very direct with them in terms of helping them to understand this new generation are coming in, both in terms of how they're spoken to, some of the language that is used that could be misinterpreted. I guess some of the things that are important to the next generation around, you know, what's the direction of travel for the organization? What's the good stuff that the organization is doing, and being able to impart that. So they're learning from each other. I think that's worked really, really well for us.
The other thing I would say generally is when these processes get underway, obviously there's a huge amount of effort, there's lots of people involved in them, which means that kind of the momentum for it to happen naturally kind of snowballs. People kind of get vested in it. People think it's, you know, it's an exciting thing to be thinking about. You start a process, you want to finish a process. That's human nature. So again, being the kind of the position on the board that says, let's stop check this. What are we not thinking about? Where are the risks we're not, you know, that aren't here? Is there anything we're not looking at? Why would we not want to do this? What would be the downside? Almost kind of not trying to be too negative, but kind of making sure that you're giving the counter perspective and asking the counter questions, because typically what I've found in my experience is people get quite excited, so the conversation becomes quite positive quite quickly about how it's going to be done, rather than actually, that's great, let's go for it, but what are we not thinking about? What is it we need to worry about? What is the risk of doing this, or the risk of what we're saying and how we're saying it? So playing that kind of independent kind of third party role, I think is something that I found hugely valuable as an executive, with someone doing that to me. And equally now I try to play that role if ever we're going through any sort of acquisition activity or sales activity with any of the organizations that I've supported since then.
I do personally find that a lot of the large corporate boards somehow focus a lot on compliance, right? But there is an increasing trend towards finding people who are going to be able to contribute from a more a entrepreneurial, or what I call people with founders mindset, right? And that's important because that thinking, the entrepreneurial thinking, if you get too many people from large corporate companies and accountants, lawyers, and all that, you're probably not going to get that startup, that founders thinking, right? And I think that's going to be actually an important part of organizations who really want to scale, who really want to grow, to have that sort of capability on their board.
This question is, what do we think is going to be the impact of risk over the next few years? And again, you can see that cyber risk still sits very highly at the top of the list, as does the impact of human capital. So they're very similar, except the one that's coming up more is the point around digital disruption and new technology and AI. And interestingly, within that, a lot in the financial sector, there's concern around currencies such as Bitcoin.
When as a company, we're thinking, great, we're going to start using AI. Unlike all of IT previously, when you start to use this, the outcome is not guaranteed. So if we expect 100% accuracy, reliability, these generative models do not always achieve this. So it is difficult, and also just the process of building it. So how long will it take? How much will it cost? And even if you use off-the-shelf tooling, even then it's like you're not entirely sure how well it will work and what adaptation, customization, work in preparing your data, etc. So that's a bit of a question and should be looked at. The shifting sands of AI is one of the big problems. Of course, we start building things, we start using things, and whether we're building or buying, within 3 to 6 months, there's probably something better, faster, cheaper that's come out. So that long-term decision making is very difficult.
Now, there's far more scrutiny over governance standards across all types of companies. I mean, the obvious ones that Dali's already spoken about are those that are government or semi-government, and we need to be clear, in this part of the world, that counts for a very, very large number of businesses. We do have businesses that are on the stock markets, whether it's a Tadawul in Saudi, whether it's ADX or the Dubai Stock Exchange. But the difference here is, even though a lot of these companies are listed, certainly the banks, it doesn't look and feel the same as it does in Europe. So a lot of the banks are listed, but they still have very, very chunky private shareholders. Those chunky private shareholders tend to have board control.
Boards should adopt a multi-layered approach under this responsible AI framework, and that would cover three key, I would say, attributes or three key components of this framework. The first being actually the board itself. There are different ways of doing that. Some organizations could include people with expertise in responsible AI within their board. Other organizations could actually have almost like a shadow board, which is only focused on responsible AI governance. Some organizations like to do a combination of both. So whichever method you follow, which covers your own organizational culture, it is important to ensure that you have somebody on the board who has responsible AI expertise.